MAUS cassettes. Gosh, I miss those times, man.
Alright lads, do you want a tank that's so bad that I couldn't even be bothered fully modifying it? And a tank that's so bad that getting footage for this video physically pained me? Well, look no further than the MAUS. This piece of shit has been memed so much that people still want to grind for it once a year. This tank used to be the top tier tank available to the Germans many years ago, but it was removed around 2 years ago and is now only available once a year for grinding. And every year, thousands of new players fall for the meme and think that this over-engineered garbage is actually worth grinding. Alright lads, today we're going to be triggering a lot of people and probably a lot of Germans, but I'm English, so that's kind of my national duty. Today we're going to be talking about the MAUS. In realistic battles this is battle rating 7.7, however in arcade battles it's actually battle rating 8.0. As I've already covered, the way you unlock this is it's only available once a year, and you basically just have to grind it out. To put this vehicle in your lineup, it's going to cost you 120,000 silver lions. Trust me lads, you're going to need all the help you can get in this tank, so I'd highly recommend getting the Expert in Ace qualifications, and 1,400 golden eagles for the latter. Seeing as this tank is actual literal garbage, it has a surprisingly high repair cost of 14,277 silver lions. In terms of customization, there are several camouflages available for golden eagles, and a single camouflage available on the Guardian marketplace. Moving on to the rewards, and there are actually very little rewards for actually playing this, but you do have an RP reward modifier of 416% and a silver lion modifier of 240%. And there may be some people that think I'm just being dramatic for the video, but I've actually had this tank unlocked for a very long time, and while it was powerful when the top tier in the Soviet territory was the IS-3, now that battle rating 8.3 and 8.7 are introduced, the MAUS is basically now just a heap of old junk, with an old Kriegsmarine engine, and quite literally half of Germany's steel reserve. Alright lads, there's no real way to hide this. The mobility of the MAUS is absolutely dog shit, and even that's been rather kind to the MAUS. This tank is famous for being one of the heaviest tanks ever produced, weighing in at 188 tons. It truly would have been a nightmare trying to get the MAUS across the muddy Soviet plains. Luckily however, in the design of the tank, one engineer had the brilliant idea of putting a U-boat engine in it. Yes, that's right, a submarine engine. As a result, in realistic and simulator battles, the MAUS has a power output of 1,200 horsepower. Combined with the vehicle's weight of 188 tons, that gives you a stunning power to weight ratio of 6.4 horsepower per ton, giving this tank probably the lowest power to weight ratio currently in War Thunder. And as you could probably guess, seeing as this thing weighs nearly 200 tons, its top speed isn't that good either. It can reach a top speed of 21 km per hour, both forwards and backwards. And it's not like you reach that 21 km per hour quickly. So your acceleration is terrible, and your top speed is also terrible. We've covered the mobility. What about the manoeuvrability? Well, as you can see, the MAUS is incredibly long. This long length, as well as the sheer weight of the tank, makes it very slow when traversing the hull of this vehicle. There's no real secrets here, the MAUS is absolute garbage when it comes to mobility and manoeuvrability. This is compounded by the fact that it's such a high battle rating of 7.7. The battle ratings between 7.3 and 7.7 transition away from the armor meta and more towards the mobility meta. And I'm sorry to say, at battle rating 7.7, where a lot of your games are up to 8.3, the MAUS is simply overwhelmed and outcompeted. We now come on to the traditional strength of the MAUS, its armor and survivability. Although I'd argue that this is actually its biggest downside. All of that weight that we covered in the last segment basically went into massive slab-sided armor, as you can probably tell by looking at this behemoth. The MAUS was designed to withstand pretty much all of the guns available to the Allied and Soviet forces in World War II. Somehow the Germans completely ignored the fact that P-47s, IL-2s and Tempests were constantly knocking out tanks in all their operations. How they thought a vehicle this big and resource dependent would survive aerial bombing, I'm not too sure, but this is War Thunder, so real life problems don't matter. If in War Thunder you were fighting around 5.7 to 6.0 vehicles, which would have been kind of accurate for World War II, then yeah, this tank would be unstoppable. Its armor can only really be penetrated once we approach the Korean War era guns. But this is battle rating 7.7, so pretty much every tank can kill you. But we'll get onto that shortly. First, let's go over the survivability. Now the MAUS actually has a crew of 6 men, with 2 drivers at the very front of the vehicle, and a gunner commander and 2 loaders in the fighting compartment of the turret. I'm going to say right away, that shooting the upper frontal plate and lower frontal plate of this tank is pretty much just going to be an automatic bounce. There's also not much behind the upper frontal plate. You have the driver and co-driver, sure, but you then just have an engine and transmission. Seeing as the bulk of the crew are located in the turret, as well as most of the ammunition, I'd always recommend targeting the turret if you find yourself going up against one of these tanks. The ammunition is concentrated at the rear of the turret and just below the turret ring. A penetrating round contacting this ammunition will result in an ammunition detonation, instantly killing the vehicle. This isn't really possible to do if you're fighting a MAUS from the front, but if you get the tank's side or rear shot, shooting the very back of the turret is an easy way to one-shot this tank. Quickly covering the armour, the low frontal plate has around 380mm of protection, and the upper frontal plate has around 400mm. Moving up to the turret, and the very roundest, flattest part of the turret only has 240mm of protection, so it's quite easy to penetrate the tank here. The side of the hull has very good protection, it's got 180mm, so you can side scrape very effectively in this tank. The side of the turret is also very well armoured, with 310mm here, again allowing you to angle and bounce occasional incoming shots. The whole gimmick of the MAUS is that it essentially has the frontal protection of a regular tank, but has it spread across both the front and the sides. Whereas most tanks at 7.7 have a very well armoured front, but then weak sides and rear. That isn't really true for the MAUS. It has kind of similar levels of protection all around it, but it sacrifices everything for that armoured protection. And let's be honest, most guns at 7.7 can fire some sort of sub-caliber or chemical warhead, like HEATFS or APDS, and you can just penetrate the armour. So while this armour may be intimidating for the newer players, an experienced player with a ground out chemical or APDS round can just go straight through the turret front, or just knock out the gun and then flank and spam. It's also worth mentioning that if you get an up tier up to 8.7 or 8.3, then literally lads, I'll pray for your souls. Dante had 7 circles of hell, but trust me lads, a full up tier in the MAUS is like an 8th circle of hell. We then come on to the firepower of the MAUS. And just like the Germans used a shorty 88mm in the Tiger E, they used a long barreled 88 in the Tiger IIs, they decided to use another flat gun for the main weapon of the MAUS. This is the 128mm KWK 44 gun. You can carry a lot of ammunition, 68 rounds, but you have a rather bad reload time for 7.7. With an ace crew you can get your reload time down to 18.2 seconds. While the gun is very powerful, you have to remember at battle rating 7.7, you have the British 105mm gun found on the Centurion, firing every 10 or so seconds, but it can penetrate over 300mm of armour. It's important to remember that size isn't everything. At least that's what my previous girlfriends have told me. But anyway, the gun has a vertical guidance characteristics of 23 degrees of elevation. I assume the Germans were planning on using this tank as some sort of indirect fire howitzer. A very expensive and impractical one, but hey ho. The tank also has gun depression of 7 degrees, which is surprisingly good to be honest, for such a long vehicle, though I highly doubt you'll be able to get into a hold down position in this tank. It's just too slow to get to an exploitative position. So, the ammunition. Well, you have 2 stock shells, a high explosive round, as well as an armor piercing cap shell. The HE round is a meme, why you'd ever use HE at 7.7 is beyond me. The APC round travels at 930 meters per second, which is a rather slow muzzle velocity for this battle rating. It also contains 786 grams of TNT, and can penetrate 237mm of flat armour at a range of 500 meters. Luckily for you however, you have an APC BC round as a rank 1 unlock. This increases the penetration up to 257mm of penetration. This is due to the addition of a ballistic cap, and the round also travels 10 meters per second faster, which is something I guess. The real fun begins however, when you get the rank 4 shell upgrade. This is basically an 88mm shell with a 128mm sabot surrounding it. This increases the muzzle velocity substantially, up to 1230 meters per second, but you have a much reduced explosive filler, down to 108 grams of TNT, over 50% less compared to the last 2 shells. But what you lack in explosive filler, you make up for in penetration. This final round can penetrate 288mm of flat armour at a range of 500 meters. The MAUS also has a secondary cannon, the 75mm KWK L36 gun. This last part of the designation is important, as it means it's got quite a short barrel length, and a low barrel length means a low muzzle velocity. This smaller 75mm gun is basically for anti-infantry, at least that's what I assume it's for. You'll have a selection of rounds, all either high explosive smoke or high explosive anti-tank. These rounds aren't powerful enough to be used against the majority of tanks you'll come across. You can use it to lay a pretty effective smoke screen, or trick people into thinking you fired your main gun. But by and large, this 75mm gun is not useful whatsoever. Throughout this entire review, I haven't exactly hid my contempt for this tank, at least I don't think I have. It's just too fat, a bit like me in my teen years. Sadly for the MAUS, there probably isn't going to be a redemption. Gaijin have repeatedly shot down the idea of dropping this thing down to battle rating 7.3, as they said that it would be too overpowered. I'd argue against this. Most tanks at battle rating 7.3 can at least destroy the gun barrel. They can also outflank it. The BMP-1 is also at battle rating 7.3, which both has a high explosive anti-tank shell, as well as an anti-tank guided missile. You also have a lot of incredibly powerful aircraft at around 7.3, which could more than certainly deal with the tank. You could argue in a down tier to 6.3 it would be completely overpowered, but I mean, there's 5 other tanks in War Thunder that are blatantly overpowered right now that I could name, so why do Gaijin even pretend to give a shit about player experience when the last 3 or 4 years have proven otherwise? But anyway, the tank is a pretty good meme tank. It should be viewed in the same way people view the T95, just a bit of fun for a laugh, and pretty much a bygone era in terms of usefulness on the battlefield. But anyway lads, I've been SAKO Sniper. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you'd like to see more reviews, then please do subscribe and give a like, it does help the channel grow. Don't forget to leave a comment below as to what vehicle you would like to see reviewed, and as always lads, thank you very much for watching. Alright lads, I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please do consider subscribing to the channel. You can also leave a like and a comment, which again, also boosts me in the algorithm, helping my channel to grow. You can also follow me on Twitter, as well as Twitch. And if you're a huge fan of the channel, you can become a member of the YouTube channel, which will give you a unique icon next to your comment, in both comments under videos and on YouTube live streams. Once again, thank you very much for watching this far into the video lads, and I'll see you in the next one.